who's here considering in starting to become a professional photographer, or just like trying to understand what it takes? Good, good. Well, congratulations, because it's going to be an awesome, it's an awesome career. My plan here is to basically talk a little bit of what are the pros and cons, and share with you also what I did when I started to do this, because I started as a hobbyist photographer, and then I decided to, jump in and become a professional one. And then I also been coaching other photographers, because I teach photography, and I've been coaching other photographers who also want to do this, and I'm going to be sharing successful experiences. And I'm also going to be telling a little bit of things that I've seen on the road, why sometimes things don't work, but at least that you're going to, get some ideas about it, okay? So the structure of today's class, it's first I'm going to be sharing my personal story and what is my life as a professional photographer. Then I'm going to be sharing basically tips on why it's important to find a hub, learn your camera. The equipment that you have is enough when you're starting, believe it or not. The importance of looking at photographs. Why it's important also to learn about the masters and get inspiration from them. You have to be aware also what's going outside. Then customizing your technique, how to get clients. What were the things that I did to get my first clients, and what I have seen with people that I've been coaching on how they're getting their clients. Then why it's important to show your work in a website. Some tips on pricing, because I think this is something that not necessarily many people know how to calculate, and what are the things that you should consider, so this is important. The importance of contracts, templates, registering your company, and the most important thing is to keep learning, because once you start and you have your own business, one of the things I've seen with a lot of entrepreneurs is those guys are reading all the time. So that's super important, and I'll be sharing the 2 books that I'm reading this month, okay? Which I find useful. Good. I do want to ask if we can do the Q&A by the end of the presentation, so it's easier for the guys of B&H to kind of like edit the video and all of that stuff, right? Okay, good. So welcome one more time. My name is Patricia, and I'm just going to start with my personal story. So first of all, this whole thing started about 10 years ago when I started to say, you know what, I know I went to engineering school and I graduated there and I had a job in a corporation back home. I'm originally from Venezuela. But then when I was there with all these people, I was like, this is not necessarily what I want to do. It's cool. I loved while I was studying in college, but that wasn't what I wanted to do. And there was something inside me. I started taking pictures since I was a little kid. Basically my dad had a camera. He was always taking pictures of us, and I loved just to basically keep memories of us. That was my goal. Like, I loved just taking pictures of us, like on vacations. When I say us, it's my mom, dad, and my 3 siblings. And then little by little, I started to realize that I wanted to do this like beyond, just filling in albums. And that's when I realized that I had to do a change, but I had to keep my work. So I kept my work, my corporate job, and then I started to go, and I started to take classes in a school in Venezuela, and then that's suddenly when things started to click. And that's kind of like the story I want to share. Then I also teach photography, and I'm super happy to see a bunch of like familiar faces. Thank you so much, guys, for coming. And by teaching, I've been experiencing what does it take for others to also become a professional photographer. So that's what I plan to, share with you today. The most important thing, guys, is when you start as a professional photographer, the most important thing is that it's awesome. I mean, I don't see myself doing anything else than, doing photography, photographing, and teaching photography. The most important thing is that, and this is something I like to always say and be honest, is when you become a professional photographer, you're actually going to be taking less pictures than you used when you were a hobbyist, and you're going to spend a lot of time doing the business stuff, okay? And that might not be so much fun, but it's important. It's reality. Then a cool thing is that you're going to be your own boss. But you know what that means? It's not only like, oh, you can take vacations whenever you want, but it also means that if you don't do things and you don't work on your things, then nothing is going to happen. You're not going to get your paycheck. So that's important to remember. And then the most important thing that I've seen in everybody who has succeeded as a professional photographer, like all the people that I know, because I went to schools, I went to ICP, and you'll see, is that not everybody ended up becoming a professional photographer, but what really takes is passion and grit. Like, you have to believe in what you're doing, and you have to be passionate about it, because it's not easy, okay? So that's a little bit about my personal story, and what I plan to do now is share with you what I did. So I was back home, Venezuela, working. You know, I was a financial planner. And then I liked it. I liked it. And actually, I used to teach there as well, like for my company. But it wasn't like my passion, you know? It wasn't the thing that I wanted to do. And then I said, let me just find a place that will allow me to study after work. And that's when I found my dear school back there, which is called Roberto Mata. And there I just basically, after 5 o'clock, I left work and I took every single class that I could from 6 to 10. That was my plan, Monday to Friday, even the weekends. After that, my husband and I had a conversation, and we said, so what is that you want to do in the future? You know, Venezuela, 10 years ago, wasn't doing very well, and we wanted to have plans on how to leave the country. But I was clear that I wanted to pursue photography. I didn't want to leave, you know, any more like planning or financial planning. I wanted to be a photographer. And then we said, okay, let's make a plan. And literally, we just sat down, you know, a couple of nights, and then I told him, I really want to go to either New York or London to study photography. And then we started to, like, I started to apply to schools. I started to do all like the tests that you need to do. And then I found that I was accepted into ICP. And I did their full-time program in general studies, which was an amazing thing. So I arrived to New York. I had to wait a couple of months before I started ICP, and that's when I decided to continue my education, taking an online certificate in digital arts. I mean, as I said, the school is called Sessions. It's an online school, and I said, look, I'm an engineer. I don't know so much about, you know, the technicalities or things in art, so it's important for me to understand that. So that's why I did that in the between of you know, coming from Venezuela to ICP. Very useful because it gave me a way to understand tools that were important, such as Photoshop, Lightroom, which are important later on. I'm going to talk about that as well. And then I started ICP. The most amazing thing that I got from ICP was the network that I met there. I met all these amazing photographers that I used to, you know, study, and I'm like, oh, I just met Marielle and Mark, and I actually assisted for her, you know, and that was the biggest plus of coming to New York and studying at ICP. After that, you know, I graduated. That was in 2010, and then I decided, you know, I still want to learn more, but I want to see how people are working, like what are they doing? And that's why I ended up applying to an internship at Marielle and Mark's studio. Sadly, she passed away a while ago. I also did an internship at a gallery called 25CPW, where I met also amazing photographers, and I had an understanding of, you know, how the art gallery works, and you know, if I wanted to do that. I also was working as a photographer at a online magazine called Urban Daddy, which was very cool because I ended up going to these venues like new restaurants in New York and just taking pictures of it and building some portfolio. So all of these experiences were adding into my portfolio, you know, into my understanding. You know, assisting and interning for Marielle and Mark was an amazing experience because I got to see how she interacted with her clients and how she worked at the studio. Her husband, Martin, is like an amazing guy, like a super cool guy in terms of lighting. So what I did at the same time, and I'm just sharing you with the things that I did, was was doing on my own, like my personal projects in lighting. And then I went, and while I was working, I'm like, Martin, do you have a second? Can you look at my picture here? What do you think? And then he was checking my light. He was like, okay, I think you have too much light there, a little light here, bump this up. And then I redid that picture. And then he's like, you got it, girl. And it was really cool because I had this, first feedback from them. And Mary Ellen was super nice. Like, she normally with her interns, gave you feedback about what's going on. And I learned the importance of feedback. I learned the importance of showing and sharing your work. I learned the importance of, being knowledgeable at a technique. And that's super important, okay? After that, I said, well, I also have to make a living now, right? And I love to teach. And that's something that I just started to do right away after I finished classes. Actually, here's one of my first private photography classes, Laura. So I started just to teach private classes, private lessons, and that's how basically in the end, after I used to teach before as well in Venezuela, but teaching here in New York City, it came into my mind, like maybe I should create a photography school, for people who love photography and they are now like hobbyists, but they don't know how to use their camera, so they just want to learn how to use it. So that's how I ended up creating a Photo Uno photography school. And a year after that, my husband joined me. And it was super good because my husband, it's actually a guy who works in marketing in a corporation for many, many years. So, I love to teach and I like the art and I love the photography, but it was extremely useful to learn from someone who knows about marketing. I did know a little bit about finance, I have to confess, but it was extremely useful to have his side and his experience, in like 13 and plus years working in the corporate side. So that's a little bit my path. What I want to say with my first tip is, guys, you have to find a school and you have to learn. You have to be knowledgeable. Hey, Cara. You have to do your best. You have to be curious, okay? And not only you're going to learn and gain techniques and knowledge on how to use your camera, but you're also going to meet other people who share the same passion and interest like you. And that's super important when you're starting this, okay? So that's my tip number one. Find a school, an institution, something that fits your schedule. That's important, okay? Because then you're like, oh, I don't have time, I can't do this. And that's when complications come and then nothing happens, okay? So that's my tip number one. Tip number two, learn your camera. Look, one of the things I realized when I was working with studying with a lot of students who previously went to art school, is that not necessarily they knew about how to use their camera. And I'm like, and then when I was looking at Mary Ellen and Martin and all these amazing photographers, E.J. Camp, Martin Schiller, they're super technical. They know their stuff so well. They know exactly what's going on. And I heard one time, you can't be green. Green meant, in Martin Schiller's word, as he meant you have to know your thing. You have to know your technique. It is important to understand the equipment that you have and what does ISO, aperture, and shutter speed do. What is it doing for you? What does that mean? How does that translate into an image? So I made sure that I got that information. I took as many classes as I could while I was in that school in Venezuela. That's why I took that online class in digital arts. That's why I went to ICP, and they told me you can only take 4 classes. I'm like, listen, I only have to study here. That's my only responsibility, so give me more. I can handle this. So I took as many classes as I could. It's when I realized when I teach my digital photography 1 class and I ask my students, so what do you want to do with your pictures? What do you want to do as a photographer? They're like, I really don't know. I just love photography. I love to take pictures of random things, abstract things, people, street photography, but I really don't know. And that's okay. You don't have to know from the beginning what you want to do. And that's the whole point of studying and learning your camera, okay? And that's normal. Everybody starts like that, okay? But the truth is, and what I was able to realize, is that the more I studied, the more I met other people, the more I saw their work, I said, I think I like portraiture, I was interning Urban Daddy, doing the the venues and photographing spaces. It was cool because I'm a technical person, being honest, but you know, the venues weren't speaking to me. People were, and I love that. So that's how little by little I started to realize that I had to work with people. Good? So that's why, you know, you have to kind of like learn your camera, take your classes, and little by little you're going to start figuring out. Okay? So that's tip number 2. Tip number 3, guys, this is super important. When I started, you know, actually with my first digital camera, I got an Olympus when Olympus still produced, you know, DSLRs, and it was an okay camera. You know, it wasn't like the 5D, because I wanted the 5D, the very first one. I'm like, I'm going to get the 5D. I did get it at the end when I started at ICP, but I didn't buy it right away. And what I did, it was with that very simple camera, non-full frame, whatever, with an okay lens, I just started to take pictures. I just started, you know, to study. And what I'm trying to see here is that while you're learning, it's going to take you some time. Cameras change. The technology is going to be changing, right? But sometimes the lenses are going to be the same, like they stay with you. So I'm more of a pro of, if you want to invest on something, invest in a good lens, one that allows you to work better in low light situations, but just stay with that camera that you have. I've seen students all the time with like entry-level cameras, and there's one here that I admire a lot, who makes the most amazing work with his Nikon 5300, whatever. And it's an entry-level camera, and he's doing just fine, okay? So start with what you have. That's my tip. Start small, because what you have to understand in terms of business is that every purchase you make means less profit for you. And believe me, making a living as a photographer, it's not easy, okay? So you have to start small. As you evolve and you understand what you want, that's when I say, go ahead and invest in this equipment, because now you understand what you want. You know how many purchases I ended up doing sometimes that weren't useful? And I even opened them from the box, and then I just ended up like reselling them. So because when you don't know what you're doing, you're probably just listening to tutorials and stuff like that, and you just buy whatever thing the guy said. But believe me, what you have is enough. Start small and let the camera and the lens evolve with you. And when you find that now it's ready for you to, you know, make a good jump, that's when you buy the fancy camera. Good? So remember that. Start small. Every purchase you make means less profit for you, okay? Plus, I always like to say this. You know, my dream is to cook amazing. And I have an amazing oven, but you know, I'm not a chef. So what I'm trying to say is that the camera, the fancy camera, is not going to make you a photographer necessarily. It helps, but you know, use what you have, okay? So remember, the equipment that you have is enough. Tip number 4, look at photographs. That's another thing that I learned. You know, I had this conversation once with one of my professors back home, and he said, it's either you have an eye or not for photography. And I'm like, okay, I didn't have the same opinion. One of the things that I've seen all the time throughout the years is that the more people look at other photographers' work and they see how the picture was made, what is that thing that I like about it, then magic starts to happen. Let me tell you, from my Digital Photography 1 class, on class 5, we start talking to them about the rule of thirds. In the moment I mention that, and in the moment I show them how that thing works, and I'm sure you all know the rule of thirds. Next class, what I first see is people applying the rule of thirds. What does that mean? That people are already looking at images, understanding why they're good, and then they, boom, start to produce good work. The other thing I learned when I was at ICP was that all these amazing photographers, you know what they were doing? Because I used to intern as well at the library, just like organizing books and making sure that I was like looking at the work that this guy was looking at and why and when and whatever. All these super duper photographers, they were looking all the time at other photographers' work. And it's truly, truly important because you get inspiration. And it is important. Just by understanding like, who are your favorite photographers and why, that's going to give you later a guide And guess what? You are in New York City. So it's very likely that you might even meet them, okay? So always remember, photography is visual. So you have to look at photographs. Otherwise, you know, not because you have the camera. I mean, it does produce sometimes like that cool effect of background blur and all, but you have to start producing good pictures, and the best source you have is just by looking at photographs, okay? Think about how it was made. What's the lighting like? Like, what's the technique they use? And then even try to imitate the picture. That's cool. That's not cheating. I have a student, she said, that's cheating. I'm like, no, that's not cheating, you're practicing, okay? So always remember, look at photographs. Here, I want to show you the work of one of my students. She was one of my first digital photography 1 students in Photo Uno. And I taught a class. I love black and white. I don't know if you saw it. I like a lot black and white. I started with the darkroom and all, so that's kind of like what I think is the reason why I love so much black and white. But I taught a seminar about black and white photography. And I started to show all these black and white photographers, you know, and talk about them and show their work. And she loved this image of Edward Weston. She loved the image of Edward Weston and the pepper, right? And then, you know, she told me, like, I have this super hectic work. Like, it's my schedule is crazy. But I'm going to do my homework, teacher. I'm going to do it. I'm like, good, good, good. And next time when she brings her homework, and for those of you who have taken Photography 1 with me, this is what she brought for class number 5 after she learned manual mode. And basically, she just used the inspiration of Edward Weston and the technique that she learned in the classroom, and she did this work while she was working from her office. And she called the project Material World. And this is basically what I say, see what happens when you just look at someone and you take it and you see why you like it and how it was made, and then you try to do your own interpretation of it. Magic does happen like that, okay? So it's important to look at photographs. So this is Veronica's work, and I basically was amazed how she was able to do this while she was working, her lunch break. Good? So that's why I truly believe in looking at photographs. And I've seen that all the time with the most amazing photographers, always. Then, tip number 5. This I call learn about the masters, find an inspiration. So, you know, you've been seeing these pictures and you like them. You don't know necessarily why, but you like them. Or maybe you start to answer those questions. And then suddenly, what I always recommend to my students is think about a project, not in single images. When I started with a Flickr account. And then, of course, I was, you know, posting my landscape homework. Boom, there are my landscape pictures. And then I was posting my portrait homework. Boom. Then my product photography homework. Boom. And all my Flickr looked like what I call a carnival of images. It was cool because that was my exploration phase. But whenever you start to understand what you like and why, it is important to now start to think in developing a project. And a project, guys, is how I teach, like in the class. Just think about a concept, like a theme. For example, a subject, Central Park. Then just go in Central Park and do a shallow depth of field shot in Central Park. Do a panning shot in Central Park. Make a long exposure in Central Park. But you are having like a base, a goal. It's Central Park, and then you're exploring your different techniques. But then you have a project, your first project. And that's important. And by looking at other photographers' work, that helps. Good? Very, very important. So that's where you find your inspiration. My inspiration has always been like, since I was a kid, I loved like light and shadow, the effect of light and shadow. It's Caravaggio's fault, the painter. I looked at one of the paintings with my dad. I'm like, whoa, it's really cool. And he's like, it's a little bit tragic, right? I'm like, no, I like it. I like it. It's cool. So that's how I ended up understanding that that's what I wanted to do as a style in terms of light. Okay, and I was exploring that kind of like light and shadow look, but not necessarily being applied to like families and kids, which is what I do now, but just like practicing it and nailing it, you know, the technique. So again, remember, learn about the masters. That's going to give you inspiration, but the most important thing is start to develop a project, not like single pretty pictures. I mean, it's good, but try to always make sure that you have a project in mind. Because if you eventually want to apply somewhere, they're not going to show you, like, they don't want to see random pictures of you. They want to see a project, and that's important to know. Good? So learn about the masters, find your inspiration, and work in projects. The other thing that I'm super happy to be here in New York City is that there's so many things going on in New York City. Like in photography, this is the place to be. There's so much stuff going on. Don't get overwhelmed. If you can go to, the event, go. If you can't, it's okay. Next year, it's fine. But make the most out of the Chelsea, the galleries in Chelsea. There are I don't know if 100, but there are a lot of galleries in Chelsea that are specific for photography. One of them, it's Aperture. Aperture shows the work of many, many photographers. They have lectures there as well. Here, I have B&H. I mean, this is amazing that they're organizing these events all the time, so you can just come and learn from other photographers. It's very, very cool. So no excuse. Then now in April, we have the APAD, the photography show. Amazing. Like, that's what I always tell my students around this time of the year, say, hey guys, you really have to go to the APAD show. You know why? Because you're going to see a real Ansel Adams. I don't know if you're going to be able to buy it because you need like $500,000 or so. But at least seeing what is a good black and white print, what is a good, digital print, it's worth it. You have to go. That's the APAD show. And then in the fall, we have PDN, the Photo Plus. You can go there to lectures. You can see what they're selling, what's the new thing. You get to meet other photographers. You meet people like, oh, I'm from Australia, and then I'm showing my work here in this class. So try to go to those different activities. I mean, we are where we have to be if we want to learn about photography. At New York City, it's amazing. It's amazing. It's really amazing for photography. So remember, go out. Be aware of what's going outside. And share that in your Facebook and on Instagram, whatever. I'm here so other people can take a look at what's going on. Then the other thing, guys, I think it's really important. This is what I meant before when I heard that photographer saying, oh, you can't be green. Like, you have to know your stuff. And it's true. Is you have to customize your technique. So by now, you are at this point where, okay, I found my school. I've been taking classes. I know my camera. I know ISO, aperture, and shutter, and more. I developed this amazing project in Brooklyn. I found, that I am super into portraiture, right? That's when you're going to say, okay, if I want to do portraiture, and that's what I did. I basically tried many, many things, right? Remember when I told you? But I realized that being away from family, and just having my husband, like, as my family, and who I call my mom of New York, Laura, made me have a very, very emotional connection photographing families. I felt at home. I loved it. I mean, just looking at a mom looking at their newborn or celebrating their kid's birthday party or enjoying their maternity, that was something that it gave me this familiar feeling that I was missing because my family was my husband Francisco. And that's it. And I miss, my family is everywhere. Like literally, like one in Costa Rica, the other one in Spain, the other one in Austin. So I don't have them here next to me. But having that emotional connection with family photography, it's what made things click to me. And that's when I said, I have to make sure that if I'm going to be photographing people, the first thing I'm going to nail is my lighting. Okay? So I'm going to speak now specifically on portrait and more or less like family photography, but I'm also going to share a little bit of what I've seen with other photographers that I knew that do like architecture and stuff. But say, if you want to do portrait photography, the first thing I did, and I said this, is lighting. I took my classes, I experimented, I showed my work to like what I consider were lighting masters, and I learned a lot from that. Not only like studio lights and stuff like that, but I also learned about flash because I realized that living in New York City, right, when you go and photograph a venue in a place, I mean, it's so dark sometimes that if you don't have a flash, you're gonna have Problems. You're going to get what I call the shaky, shaky picture. So it's not going to work. So it's important to know about lighting, you know, to be able to move, not only with the studio lights, but also like as you go. Then the other thing that I found that was very, very important was to learn how to make my subjects feel comfortable. You know how I did that? Basically, it's not that I tried this with my first client. No, no, no. What I did when I came to New York, and I already had in mind that I wanted to, you know, photograph and learn photography, I started to say all my friends here, like the people I knew, hey, I'm gonna be a photographer, okay? So can I take pictures of you? And then I took my lights and whatever I had, my alien bees, I can't even remember. And then I started just to take pictures of them. And then I started to ask them, like, so how do you feel? Like, what's going on here? Like, is this weird? No, it's okay. And then I started to learn little by little, just with my friends, and then just going to parties, and just saying, I can be your photographer. I'll do it. I'll do it. I'm happy to do it. I started to learn how you can make people feel comfortable. I even took like self-portrait classes because I wanted to see what was to feel behind the camera, right? And learn how I was reacting, and then apply that experience into my subjects. And then the other thing I saw that was very, very important was to learn posing. And the way I did the posing part was, of course, I did as I went, as I was photographing people. But I also started to kind of like look at a picture of Irving Penn and say, okay, Francisco, the poor guy has posed for me so much, my husband. You have to do this pose. And he's like, oh my gosh, like 11 p.m. when he came back from work, whatever. I'm like, I have to do this. And he's like, okay. And I started to learn how to pose and understand, you know, how things were working. And of course, later when I started to work more with people, you get different reactions, because when you don't know people, it's different than when you're working with someone that you know. But still, posing, having a guide, like a picture that you like, and trying to replicate that pose, it's cool, it's good. That's how you start. Because one other thing is, okay, you may pose and all, but then the other thing that's important to learn is, why is this picture, like in terms of posing, not so good? Like what makes it a bad pose? And then you have to read like how the hands look and such. But those are basically kind of like the three things that I really focused on if I wanted to do, you know, portrait photography. I do events, like family events and stuff like that. But I think like having studied in a documentary school gave me a good base for that, because, you know, you're basically documenting events. So that's how I was able to kind of, you know, apply that knowledge into my event photography. For example, I have a friend, right, that she works always photographing pieces of like art. So what she made sure was she understood how she can use like lighting to illuminate a good piece of artwork. She also started to try what we call the tilt shift lenses, just to make sure that you don't distort, you know, the piece of work, and make sure that you see it as it has been conceived and not as it's being experienced. That's what she says. Basically, when you experience something, you know, we all have distortion in our eyes, right? So we see a little bit of a wide angle lens, right? But when you photograph something with a tilt shift lens, have you heard about those lenses? It's a lens that basically corrects distortion, right? You basically correct that distortion, and then you're able to see the piece of work how it's supposed to be. The same thing is what another friend of mine, Raphael, he's an architectural photographer, he got really good into, you know, making long exposures and exposure bracketing when he was photographing his buildings. He's an architect himself, but then he decided to do architecture, remember Raphael? And he basically learned a lot of like these techniques, like how to merge 3 sets of pictures to make sure that you have, you know, like all the tonal range, and then of course using his tilt shift lenses. So what I'm trying to say is, I can only speak really for portrait and event photography. I mean, I've tried several things, but the most important thing is, as you take classes, as you meet other people in these classes, and you see someone that's doing the thing right, just go ahead and ask them, like, what are you doing? Like, how do you do this, right? And little by little, you're gonna understand what you need to do in order to customize your technique. Super important. You have to nail that down. Very, very important, okay? So that's tip number 7. And this is the guy I was talking about. This is Caravaggio and his light and shadow effect. And it's basically, you know, kind of like a lighting look that I love, and I try to apply as much as I can. I can't always do this, but if I can, I'll do it, okay? The other thing that I learned on the go was you have to learn about a software, okay? It's not only about taking the pretty pictures and then just selecting 1 and 2 and 3. No, 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 no. You have to learn a software that's going to help you not only to organize your files, right? And, you know, select them and star them and say, these, from the 300 pictures I took in this event, I really liked or loved 80. That's okay, that's cool. But then you have this tool that's gonna help you to kind of like select the best ones. And then you need the same tool to kind of like edit the pictures and so on. So that's when I realized that Lightroom was super, super helpful. When I started, learning about software and all, I started with Photoshop. There was no Lightroom yet. And that was the tool I had. What I didn't love about Photoshop, and it's because I wasn't like making collages or anything like that, or changing, you know, the sky from one picture and putting the other picture, is that it took me so much time to open a photograph, look at it, edit it, and then save it, right? And then suddenly, when I did my first wedding, someone says, Patricia, come on, you should, and it was like a friend's wedding. It wasn't like a, you know, like a something. It was just, I said, I can do your wedding if it's okay. And then I was like, okay, now let me process all these wedding photos. And then it took me like 2 months to do that. And, you know, this person was like, but why are you taking so much time? And I started to feel uncomfortable, you know, because people are like, well, why are you taking so much time? And I'm talking about 2006. So it wasn't like the craziness, like people want the pictures like now, like tonight, right? So, but still, you know, 2 months was a lot. And then I realized, one of my friends said, Patricia, forget about Photoshop. You have to do Lightroom. You have to learn Lightroom. And that's when things started to make more sense to me, because thanks to Lightroom, I don't leave Lightroom when I'm working. So basically what I do is I, you know, take my pictures, I put them in Lightroom, I select them, I say these are the best, and these are the ones I'm going to spend time working on. Then I enhance them so I can make the pictures look color, black and white. I can't change the sky from one picture to another in Lightroom, but that's not the type of work that I do. So that's why I'm okay with Lightroom, right? And then after that, not only I edit them, but I can also share them. And the way I share them is, for example, through Lightroom, I can just publish my pictures directly into my website. So I don't have to do an extra step. I just say, publish, and it goes to my website directly. 2, I can make books from Lightroom. So if a client of mine asks me like, oh, I would like you to make an album for me, whatever, I can do it all in Lightroom. I print from Lightroom. I have a nice printer, an Epson 3880, and then I print my pictures from there. I don't have to leave that workspace. And that's what makes it awesome. And it's great for photographers, you know, who are capturing images, organizing their files, editing them, and then sharing them. To me, that's a great, great tool. So that's another tip that I would say is you have to learn a software. And that software, in my opinion, most times, it's going to be useful. Lightroom. We know more about Photoshop because it has been out longer. But honestly, if let's say you're documenting an event, right? You're going to take 500 pictures. Imagine opening 500 pictures one by one. It's going to take you forever. So whereas in Lightroom, you see them as a whole, as a batch, and you can just see them as a contact sheet, like, you know, a set of pictures of the same, you know, of the same moment, and say, this is the best one. Boom, you label it 1, you're done. Let me see the next bunch and the next bunch. So, and then, you know, edit them all. So it's much faster. This friend that I was talking to you about, the one that does like fine art photography and architectural photography, they work different than me, okay? They work with single images. The way they work is basically they take the pictures, and after they take the pictures, they show it like specific sets of pictures to the client, and then they say which one you want. And then they do work in single images. So it really depends on the type of photography that you're doing, but if you're working, you know, in sets of batches, Lightroom. But if you're just like working on one picture at a time, it does make sense to do Photoshop. Or if you're being creative, you know, like, oh, I'm doing this mixed media project and I'm doing like scans and, you know, adding layers and texture. Come here. You can see, your mama's there. You can basically, you should learn Photoshop. But if you're doing more batches, guys, I would recommend you highly Lightroom. Okay? So that's what I meant by my point number 7, in customizing your technique. And again, this is not going to happen like right away. It's not like you come and you take your first photo class and you're like, I know what I have to do. I have to take lighting, and it's not like that. It will come with time. The more you study and the more you practice, you'll figure out that, oh, this is what I really need to do to be a specialist in whatever. Yep, make sense so far? Okay. So customize your technique. Point number 8. This is important, right? How you get those clients. Okay. So, guys, I have to be honest with you. This will take some time, and the only thing I have to say is be patient and enjoy the process. I always say to my students, there are 4 P's in photography, not P of Patricia, no. There are 4 P's in photography: patience, perseverance, practice, and preparation. Okay? And this is where I really recommend you to be patient and persevere, work, and it's going to happen. So one of the things that first I found useful was I started to tell everybody I'm doing photography. Back home, I used to go to a club. Everybody in the club knew that I was doing photography. If you have kids and you're a mom and you go to a school, and then you want to do family shots, then tell the parents I'm doing family shots. If you love galleries, whatever, and you know someone in the gallery, well, then go and tell them I'm doing this. You have to share. You have to know people that you're doing that, okay? Now, one of the big things I've recommended throughout the years, and it's how I did it, is you have to try to give first. And what I mean by this is, for example, when I was back home, I had a friend who was launching her bathing suit line, right? And I was just learning how to use like lighting and photograph like people and stuff like that. And then I told you know what? I didn't have lights by then. So what I did is I asked my dad, like, Dad, how can I make like a softbox? And he's like, I know what we're gonna do. So we went to like our equivalent of Home Depot, bought a light bulb, like 2 sets, like very powerful ones, a box. We wrapped it with some that transparent paper that mamas use for gifting and stuff like that. That was my diffuser. And then I come to the shoot of my friend and her models and all, and then I come with those 2 cardboard boxes, and she's like, you're not gonna photograph like this. I'm like, don't judge. Don't judge. It's gonna be okay. So I was working with continuous, like this. Something like this, but less fancy, okay? And then, I started to produce work for her, and that gave me the insight of how to work with a client, how to deal with models. Sometimes they weren't professional models. They were just like friends, and then I dealt, learning about that. But I was doing this for free because this was giving me experience, okay? Another way that I coached one of my students, and I think she's next. Yes, Amanda. And I hope you're seeing me, Amanda, is Amanda took classes with me 3 years ago. She's from Australia, and she was staying in New York for 2 years. So she took several classes at Photo Uno, and then one day she says, Patricia, you know what? I really love the family work that you're doing, and I think that's what I want to do. So what should I do next? So then I told her, okay, like one thing I recommended her is, she said, could I assist you? And then I said, yeah, why not? So she started to assist me. She said, it's cool to assist you. Not because I'm learning the technique, because it's kind of like, you're doing the same stuff that you do in the class, but it's more like learning from you how to interact with people and how to deal with a crying baby or a nervous mom that she doesn't know what's going on with her newborn, right? So she said that was an immense insight for me and a revelation, she said. But one of the things I told her to do is, like, after she finished assisting me and taking all those classes, was go back to Australia and go and take, for a year, pictures of the families in the school of your kids. So basically go to your kids' schools and just say, hey, I would love to photograph you guys. Then I told her, like, just make sure that you get like model releases and be precise that you can, use these pictures later on, that the copyright is yours, it's your picture. But you're not only gaining experience, right? But you're also getting portfolio. Good? And then now, after a year and a half after she came back, now she has her amazing website, and she's been doing like family sessions, like Amazingly, it's super cool. Like, you know, when you see someone that you met when she was actually with an Olympus, like a small Olympus compact camera, a mirrorless camera, and then she upgraded to her Nikon, and then I came to B&H with her and bought the Profoto lights and all of that stuff so she could go back to Australia. Like, seeing what she's doing now and that it's possible, it's amazing. It's priceless. It's so cool to see someone succeed, you know? So that's what I mean by give first, okay? I'll talk about another student in giving first, but this is one of the examples. Another way that I was also doing is, you know, here in the city, I basically decided to just photograph like friends who had kids, and then that's how I started to make portfolio as well. So it is important sometimes to just photograph for free. It's fine, and especially because maybe you still don't know what you're doing necessarily, but this is going to give you, you know, a lot of insight in the process. Once you take these pictures, my tip is you have to share the work that you're doing. Just don't keep it in your computer. If you keep it in your computer, who's going to see that? So share it. Ask your friends if it's okay for you to share it. And, you know, do Instagram or a blog or a Facebook page or your website. Guys, in terms of social media, I would say it's good to do Facebook, but try to focus on one, I think, because that takes a lot of time, especially when you're learning. Although when you're learning, you probably will have more time than when you really start to work to do the social media stuff. So, but try to share your work, okay? And then the other thing I learned when I was getting these first clients was my network. I mean, it helped me a lot. So for example, in school, you know, I started to kind of like show my work was about family work and stuff. And then one of my friends says, you know, I had a meeting the other day with my lawyer or whatever. And she asked me like, so, oh, you're a photographer. Okay. Do you take pictures of families? And then he's like, no, but I know someone. So because he knew that I was interested in family photography, he actually gave me, you know, the recommendation. And it was cool because little by little then, you know, I worked with her. And then she started to recommend me. And that's how it happens sometimes. Sometimes, let's say, if your target is you love to photograph events, right? Then try and contact event planners. Try to contact places where they do events. And then just say, I'm a photographer. This is my card. This is my work. But try to do some of the events at the beginning for free just to get your portfolio. And then start to contact these people because they do want to see work of yours. Okay? Then the other thing that I think it's important is whenever you feel comfortable enough with your settings and you think that you can perform, it's completely okay to contact a local photographer and just tell them, hey, I would love to work as a second shooter. Being honest, in most of the times when you're starting off, they're not going to pay you. They're just going to test you, but that's okay because if you do a good job, then they're probably going to start to pay you. And in the way, you never know whom you're going to meet. And then you can get, like, you know, clients from there as well. And then the other thing I find super, super useful is to assist a photographer. People ask me this all the time in class, Patricia, how can I assist a photographer? And I tell them, look, photographers don't have time all the time to just be teaching you when you're assisting them. So I always tell them, take your class. If you want to assist a studio photographer, take a lighting class. Meet the studio photographer, tell them, this is what I've been doing, I would love to assist you. If they see that you know what you're doing, they'll hire you probably. But it does come a good connection when you're taking classes and then you say, oh, I would really like to assist you, like it's okay for free, that's fine. Or maybe if you have like a pay, that's fine, but that's kind of like how you make the connection. Most of the times people say, like, does just posting on Craigslist or something like that will work? I don't think so because, you know, you can find like weird stuff going on there. So I think like the best way of assisting other photographers is by taking classes or workshops with them, showing them their work, making a connection, and then just asking. Just ask. What's the worst thing you're going to get? No, it's okay. You ask another. That's it. But that's how I've seen that many of my students have gone into, you know, assisting, and even that's how I did it. Like, that's how I ended up assisting as well. Good? TAing as well, when you're taking classes. At ICP, you can do that as well, you know, like teach assist, and then you can learn a lot of things from these photographers. The most important thing is that, guys, whenever you're trying to get clients, this is going to take time. And suddenly, you know, after, I want to say this, a couple of years, like the momentum grows, and then you have like a lot of people from different areas recommending you, and then that's how can you, you know, you start making that ball to roll. That's how it goes, most of the cases. Okay, so that's my point on how to get clients. Then, giving first. Okay, this one is important. I had this fear. I guess all of you have it. People sometimes are like, do I really need to show my work in a website? Like, I don't know what to show, right? So most of the times when I'm coaching students, you know, to like do their work and go deeper into photography, I tell them, let's just go and sit and think about, look at the projects that you have been working on, right? And now let's start to show them in a website. For example, Veronica here, the website that we used was SmugMug. And she used that website. You can just basically upload your pictures. There's a quick connection from Lightroom as well. Photo Shelter is another one. There's another one called Pixieset. I mean, there are some of those places you have to pay a monthly fee. That's the only thing. But you can also do website like for free in WordPress, okay? But it is important to show your work in a website, and this is a very important tip that I see all the time when people start to work in their website. Don't put 10 pictures of the same moment that you photograph from someone. Does this make sense? For example, let's say you're photographing a family here. Hey, you were here, and we're looking at each other and laughing, whatever. And then you take 20 frames, but then from those 20 frames, you like 10. Because in this one, her face looks cute, and that one, the dad is cute, whatever it is, right? And then you're like, now I'm gonna show those 10 pictures on my website. No, don't do that. Just show the best one of that session. I can assure you that there's always the best one. A great way of seeing which one is the best one, remember the tool Lightroom that I was talking about? You select those 10 pictures, and then you look at them as a survey, like what they call survey mode. N as in survey, I joke. And then you see the 10, and then you'll see that there's always one that it's the best. And that's the one you're gonna show. Because you know, when people are looking at websites, they do this. And if they start seeing 10 pictures of the same thing, they get bored. No good, no bueno. Like I say, no bueno, okay? So always make sure to choose just one picture of that really, really good session. The other tip, guys, that I always see when people are creating their website is that we get super attached to a moment, or that you really had to climb up a tree to get that shot, and you made the impossible, but photographically speaking, the picture is okay. It's okay. I mean, I understand how in love you are of that moment, but you're in love with the moment, not of the picture. So don't put that picture. Got it? The other thing, guys, if you see a picture where slightly, let's say you're focusing on someone's face, and what's in focus is their nose and not the eye, don't put that picture. Let it go. You'll make another one. You'll make another one, and just put a picture where your sharpness is amazing, okay? So just don't put stuff because you're putting stuff. If you only have for now 3 pictures, it's fine. Believe me, if you keep contacting your friends and you still work on, you know, stuff that you're seeing, you'll be adding little by little. This is not gonna happen like next week. It's gonna take time, okay? That's the other thing I always tell my students is like, look, all these photographers that I know, they have been working in like single projects for like 8 years, 5 years. Stuff didn't happen like right away. So that's why I'm saying be patient and just make sure that you show the best of the best, okay? And remember this, less is more, not more is good, okay? Less is really more, okay? So that's in terms of the website, having your work out there. Remember when I said about working in projects? Maybe at the beginning you're working on your Central Park project and your family project and your street photography project and your travel project. That's fine. Still start to edit down the pictures, like the best ones, and put them out there, right? And later, as you specialize in more and more, you're gonna see that you're gonna start to take out. you know how it looked my website before? Like I was using like mixed media work and doing collages, and I was doing the work at Urban Daddy, right? So I had like pictures of collages with pictures of families and pictures of like venues. And then little by little I said, this doesn't make sense. So little by little I started to take it out and just leave the best work and the work that really represented me. But that took me some time, but it's fine. It's fine because you're figuring out, okay? Then the other thing it's important on the websites and on your website, it is important to have an about section. In this about section, add a photo of yours. If you have a friend who's like makes amazing portraits, just say, hey, could you take a picture of me, or you can make your own picture, whatever the case is. But make sure that you show a picture of you, preferably not the typical like, oh, me with the cool camera in front of my eye. Don't do that because people want to see your face. So try not to cover your face with the camera. And also write something about you, like why you like to photograph. People are not going to spend time in the about section, to be honest. But it's good that if they click on that area, that they see you and they know who you are. And if you have credentials, like I went to this school or whatever, put them in so they see that you have some education. Yep. Then the other thing is it's important to make sure that it's easy for them to contact you. Nowadays, all these like templates offer the area like, oh, contact me, and then they'll just send you an email. Or in WordPress, you know, you can add that as an area like contact me, and you'll get the emails right away. It's important because, you know, if someone stumbles upon your website, you want them to be able to contact you. Or if someone, let's say, recommends you and they're like, oh, this is this photographer I met the other day, but I don't know, like I know their name, and then they give your name but they don't have your contact info. If you don't have that, they're only going to see your website, but how can I contact you? So make sure that your contact info is there. Then the other thing that it's important as well, and this might take time, but then my tip is just focus on the images, is have a blog, okay? If you don't feel ready for a website, just have a blog. What I feel about the blog compared to the website is that when you have a blog, you can show like 4 pictures of your, art gallery session. Yep. So you can put like 4 or 5 pictures of the same thing, and then you can say, this is a set of pictures that I took in this gallery. It was awesome. I got to meet the artist, whatever, and this is it. So blogs are a little bit more easy to kind of like post your work because everybody understands it's like a blog and you're just showing what you're doing. So just showing all the pictures that you took, like not all, sorry, like the best 4 or 5 pictures, perfect. Not too much. Don't do more. I would say don't do more than 10. 4 best 5 pictures, and then say something about what you photographed and why. That's always good because then you constantly can just like be posting, like the pictures of each of your sessions. And I think this is easier to do than sometimes maybe just creating a website if you don't know where to start, okay? So the blog is good. And again, focus on the images. And lastly, guys, I know there's Instagram and Facebook. I mean, when I started, there was Facebook, but it wasn't like the Facebook that we have today where we're sharing comments and events and, all this stuff. It was a little bit more simple. There was no Instagram. I know people that, now basically have created their whole career through Instagram, but I would say this takes time, especially when you become to be more serious and get more jobs. So just try to choose one channel and then you'll see, right? But don't go crazy like trying to post everywhere because that takes time and you have to do more important things, just trying to cover every single thing, okay? Just choose one channel. The most important thing, what I've seen with these two is that here people are gonna know what you're doing and they're gonna engage with your work. So it's good, and I always think it's important to show not only your work, like your pictures, but it's also nice to show a little bit about what you're doing, like who you are, like in a more informal situation, okay? So that's good to do. So that's what I meant by the website. It is important. And again, this goes back again to the idea of thinking about making projects and not single images, because then you're gonna be able to put them in those projects. And then if you have a project on New York City streets, then as you go and as you photograph, right, you'll be able to add more and more and more of those best pictures. And you'll see sometimes you're gonna have one picture and you like it, but you're not super sure about it. With time, you're probably gonna make a better one. So take that one out and put the new one for, like then. Got it? But just don't keep them there forever. Good, you'll see you're gonna be improving. The work that you were doing 3 years ago, it's not the same as the one that you're gonna be doing. You're gonna be changing every year, it's amazing. Okay, so that's in terms of showing your work and the website and blog and social media. Oh, good, here. This is another one of my students. So this is David Perlman. And David, he started taking classes with me, I think it was in 2012. He's an actor. And I was amazed because the first time I met him, he says, I want to become a headshot photographer. and he was taking digital photography 1. I'm like, you know that already? Wow, that's amazing. I didn't know what I wanted to do. I knew I wanted to do photography, but I didn't know exactly what I wanted to do. So he's an actor, and he knew and he had all the knowledge of what happens behind the scenes and in the acting world, headshots. So basically, he started taking his photography 1, photography 2. Every single homework that he brought while in class was about headshots. And then he was asking me, Patricia, what should I do? And then I was like, okay, remember, don't spend money. So just go to, what's the store, Staples, and buy a white cardboard, and try to go to Central Park with your friend and ask them to hold the cardboard like this so you can reflect light on their face. And then he said, Patricia, I really like the effect, but I felt kind of weird with that cardboard. Do you recommend something else? Of course, I told him, go just get a reflector, like a PhotoFlex and whatever. So that's when he started to stop using the Staples cardboard. But sometimes you can just start with the basics because you don't know if that's how you want to work, Like having someone with a reflector here, it's an experience. So that's why I like to start with maybe like a $5 investment, and then you'll see if it works for you, okay? Or you rent. Okay? Now what I want to talk about David here is that after he took the photo 1, photo 2, he took the portrait class, and then he took the lighting class. You can sit right there. That's the husband. Thank you so much for coming. Okay. So I said don't invest so much money, right? Just see what you have. And then in the case of David, after he was doing all these homeworks related to headshot photography, he started to take the lighting class, and because he asked me, like, what should I do if I want to do headshots? And I said, you have to learn about lighting. I mean, period, you have to. So he took the lighting class, then he took also the flash class, because he said, I met this guy who's a wedding photographer, and he's a friend of a friend, and I asked him, like how you said, like just ask him if I could be his second shooter, and he said yes. And I'm like, yes! So then what I said is, you have to know about your flash. And then he started to work with this other photographer for free, working as a second shooter. And now he suddenly has been like, going between engagement sessions and wedding photography, because that's, remember when I said that not necessarily where you start, it's where you're gonna end, and it's normal, it's part of the process of learning. So he started with his headshots, he still does his headshots, but now he's doing amazing work with like weddings and engagements. And what I love about his work is that he is constantly showing his work, like, see, this is his blog. And then he shows a bunch of images. And he's very simple in what he says, like he makes a line, and then he just shows the pictures of his session. So this is what I mean, that maybe he necessarily doesn't have the website, but he does have the blog. And then people are following him, and then he shares one picture of one of the pictures that he posted on the blog on social media, and then he starts to get followers and probably people who say, hey, can I hire you? And that's how you also start getting your clients, okay? So that's one of the examples of another student, and the use of blogs, okay? Okay, another thing, very, very important. Guys, pricing. This is so important. The first thing I think many people just do is, so they finish like the photography 1 class and they say, okay, Patricia, how much should I charge? And I'm like, wait a minute. I mean, you have to first feel comfortable charging someone for the work that you're doing. If you don't know what you're doing, I would say start doing it for free at least, and figure it out, and then feel comfortable. But while you're doing this, what's important about pricing is it's your price. I mean, you do have to look at local prices, and what other photographers are doing. Nowadays, it's like, you can see the photographers' prices on their website. It's not a mystery, right? But because someone is charging whatever amount of dollars, it doesn't mean that you can charge that because you finished like your photography 1 class, okay? So the first thing I would do is, as you're trying and photographing people, the first thing I always recommend is this: measure your time. For example, there's a big misconception when someone hires you and they say, oh, but why are you charging me this if you're only coming to photograph me an hour? And I'm like, the thing is that I wish this was it. Like, I wish I took the pictures and then by magic they came out in the, in the gallery where I share the pictures. That's not it. Like, I tell them, so if you want to know what my price includes, so this is the time that I spend editing the pictures, as in choosing them. And then after I choose these pictures, I will enhance them. And this is the time that these take, to be enhanced and make sure that they look the way they look in my website. And then, this is the time that basically, this is what I charge as a photographer, my creative fee. Oh, okay, I got it. Then sometimes they say, too expensive. It's okay, there are other photographers, that's fine. But if you're sure about your pricing and what's your value, it's fine. Now, how did I do this? So when I was taking all these projects, right, even like in school or photographing for free or just learning, what I did is I wrote down in an Excel sheet. I know it doesn't sound like very photographic, like an Excel, right? In an Excel sheet, I started to write, okay, this session took me from this time to this time. So this represents an hour. Okay, good. Then and then I wrote next to it, and this produced whatever, 400 pictures. Yeah, in an hour I took 400 pictures. Then the second step I said is, okay, from these 400 pictures, let me measure how much time does it take me to select the best photographs. Okay, so I know nowadays that in a mini session that I do, and a mini session for me, it's a 45-minute session, an hour session, right? I know I take about 300 pictures. Okay? From those 300 pictures, I know that it's going to take me half an hour to select the best 80 pictures. And that's always kind of like more or less there. And then I know that from those 80 pictures, it takes me about an hour and a half to enhance them. And then another hour, like half an hour, like sending emails, whatever. And that's how I kind of like quote my price. But it is important to make this list of your timing. How much would you like to charge per hour if someone was paying your time? Guys, because it's your time. And that's when you start to compare what you got in that fancy Excel sheet. It's not fancy, it's just, just put like, your prices, whatever. And then you compare your rate, what you got, with what other local photographers are. Then you also look at their experience, you look at your experience, and then that's how you come with your pricing. But many people, even people we went to school together, like, Patricia, how do you calculate this? And I told them, look, the way I did it was exactly like what I just said. I wrote down my timings. I said, how much would I like to be, paid for this time, this hour? Because you know what? In the future, look at this. You may have the option of hiring someone to do the editing for you. Does that make sense? I mean, I have to be honest. I do love to look at all my photographs, like all the pictures that I saw, and I do love to say, ooh, I know what I did wrong here, and this is something I'm going to improve next time. But I have to confess, I don't love editing. Like, do you see me here, like, walking around? I'm not like the type of person that likes to be sitting in front of a computer. That's not me. So then, if you need to hire someone, right, to do the work of editing for you, I would always recommend you, guys, really learn from what you're doing right and learn from what you're not doing right, like especially when you're starting. But then if you have the option, like you have a business where you can pay someone, you know how much that person may cost, like, oh, okay, I'm going to pay you this, and that's part of my costs. And then I'm going to be able to build my price based on the profit I want to have. Got it? And normally, just so you know, a profitable business, it's about, like, if you have 10, 20% revenue, that's good. Like, that's a good margin, okay? But, you should start, like, from that bottom area, like that margin that you want to have, and then you build from down up. But knowing your times, it's important. Because later on, If you want to hire someone to do the job for you, you know how much you can pay them and what you can't pay them, and then that's gonna allow you to have like a real business, okay? So you can stay as a professional photographer for longer. Good? Okay. And then the other thing, guys, that you'll see in terms of your pricing is that with time, you're gonna figure out what your products are gonna be. What I mean by this is, when I started, I took the pictures, and I did spend the time not only selecting them, but also enhancing them. And then I told people, and then I can retouch your skin, because I knew Photoshop, so I could retouch skin and all of that stuff. But you know how long it took me to retouch like someone's face? Like it took me like 40 minutes, and I hated that thing, because I was like going to bed like at 2 a.m. and I'm like, I hate this stuff of retouching. And then you know what I started to do? I started to ask my clients, like, so when you look, so they started to tell me like, oh, Patricia, but I really want them all. You know, like, don't you like offer an option where you just give me all the pictures instead of like having them retouched? And then I realized that the type of photography that I was doing wasn't about retouching and making someone look perfect. It was more about giving them their memories. And that's how I realized that it was more efficient for me, even in terms of timing, just to give them all the best photographs. And that was it, instead of like spending hours in a Photoshop in a single image. Now that's not the case of Raphael, my friend who's the architecture photographer. So he works, like, he goes to a place, he charges his creative fee, right? And after he charges his creative fee, then he'll put all the pictures, and then he'll just sell for X amount of dollars, like the picture that the client wants, and that's his model. So he does work in a single image. So what I'm trying to say is, with time and understanding what your clients like about your work, and how can you improve, and that's why it's important to contact them and send them a survey, like, what did you like, don't be afraid of that. I know it's scary. It's like, ooh, what are they gonna say? Are they gonna like it or not? It's okay, like, you're gonna develop what I call crocodile skin as you go, you'll see. But knowing what they like about your work, it's gonna give you more insight about what you need to offer as a product, and knowing your numbers and your prices and your costs, it's gonna help you to determine this as well, because you want to be efficient. Remember, 10-20% profit. Yeah. And then the other thing is that sometimes other people sell their work by image, so that's another model, right? But then, you'll just have to figure out if that's what your clients want, depending on, your type of photography. Good. So that's in terms of pricing. Another piece of advice, when I started setting up my prices, I looked at the local photographers, and then I think, like, I started a little bit low, like, let's say if someone was charging, I don't know, $400 for a mini session, I was like charging $100, right? And then, you know what was a problem there? Not only I wasn't, paying attention to this part, but you know what happened later on? To increase my price was so difficult that I lost many clients, because they were like, no, I'm not gonna pay you because you're doing the same and you're trying to pay. And it's because I started too low. So that's the importance of doing this right. Because if you know this, you're not gonna make that mistake. I already did it and it wasn't fun, okay? Because I had like good people, but it is what it is. So always remember, this is important. Good? Especially because in the future, you may want to hire someone to do that dirty work. Good? Yep. The other thing why I always say, and somehow improving my technique and learning every day more and more about Lightroom, is that I ended up finding a formula. Right? Like, if I can schedule the session, I'll schedule it in this time of the day. I'll use always my flash, right? I have my cheat sheet of poses. Priscilla, I make Priscilla, she works with me. She says, like, this is our cheat sheet. This is our set of, poses and types of pictures that we're going to do for this session, this session, this session. And you know what all that stuff gave me? it's a process, not only in terms of the pricing stuff, but a process in executing my work. And then you know what I realized? That when I was consistent with what my first professor in the darkroom, he said, learn how to make constant exposures. Learn, Brian, right? Learn how to make your, like look at the negatives. Are they all constant? Ah, yeah, now I started to connect the dots. Now I understand what he was saying. Because when you find out the way of making, you know, your exposures consistent and your process of shooting consistent, then you'll also find a way in your editing software, right, to say, oh, you create your own presets. You know, so I always create my own presets, like, you know, like I'll boost the contrast. I'll set, you know, the tone orange to this level in terms of luminosity. I'll add a little bit of vibrance and clarity. Like, it's always the same because I always shoot the same way, right? And you know how that impacted in my business model? That I was able to reduce this time. But you know, I don't need to tell that to my clients. I don't need to tell them, I reduce my editing time. I keep it like the one that I used to, and I just have that, you know, like that space. If there's a mistake or something, I still have that extra. But that's when you start to become a little bit more profitable, because you repeat your process so much over and over again, and then you figure out formulas that you can make your process faster. It's like you're making your processes like a standard. And that's why I always see that knowing your technique and improving and going fast and doing the work when you're framing. Remember, guys, I always tell you, guys, forget about, oh, I'll Photoshop that later. I'll correct that later. No. Because you don't want to be editing, right? You want to take pictures, right? So if you do the work at first, it's going to be better. Plus, it's going to increase your profit because you're reducing this part. Got it? So that's another tip that I found along the way. And making your own presets is not difficult in Lightroom. You know, the way I basically did it is I took a picture and then I started to play with it. Like, let me see how this looks with this color enhanced, or let me see how this one looks with this other color. And then I compared, like I made like what they call virtual copies. And then I realized, oh, this is the one I like the most. And then I applied it and applied. And then what happens with time is that, you know, you start getting rid of, I don't know, vignetting, whatever. But you'll see that with time, you're going to end up with a preset that when people look at your work, they're like, oh, it's really consistent. You understand? Because that's important, consistency. Good? And maximizing your time while producing your pictures. All right. So always remember, do this homework, even when you're doing the work for free. Even when you're doing it for free, that's going to give you insight over your timings, and then start to build from the bottom up. Also look at the local prices and don't start too low. Like, be fair with yourself. Okay? All right. So that's the tip number 10. It's like 14, guys. 4 more. So set up your pricing. Aha! Very, very, very important. Guys, the contract. So this is what happened. When I started, you know, like 7 years ago, like photographing more continuously, like people, I have to say most of the times the people that I work with is super nice people. Most of the times, the majority. But sometimes, you know, you say, oh, they're so nice, whatever. And then when something happens, like something wrong happens, you don't have like a backup, like, ooh, I didn't write that down. Like, is there any proof that you said that? Well, yeah, I talked to it about it, but I never wrote it. So then that's when trouble may happen, you know? And that's when I realized the importance of having a contract. Now, how did I do my first contract? Literally, I Googled and I started to look at, you know, contracts for photographers. And then I found one, and based on that one, I started to redo the contract based on what I had. But the most important thing is that you have to make sure that everybody is aligned. So basically, you know, this is what we're going to do. This is the type of session we're doing. Then you have to make sure that you specify on that agreement what are your deliverables. Like if you're going to do an hour session, then okay, your deliverables are 80 pictures, whatever, enhanced, whatever. And then people ask me like, what is enhanced? So the way, basically like you see them on my website, they're being enhanced according to my artistic whatever. Also, you have to make sure that you specify your time as a photographer, and make sure that you say, and this, the session starts from this time until this time. You have to make sure that you write down the timings, and this is so interesting. Timings in terms of delivery schedules. So. This morning, I was doing my annual checkup, and then, I'm like, oh man, I'm super excited about my lecture at B&H, whatever. I was talking to my doctor, and she's like, oh, so what are you going to talk about? I'm like, oh, how to make your way in photography. And she's like, oh, yeah. I have this friend. She has 2 kids, and she started she wanted to make a business in photography, and then she ended up like having a lot of issues with her clients, because they weren't happy with her delivery times. You know how easy it is to lose someone just because you took too long to deliver the pictures? But if you're clear, let's say if for you it takes, I don't know, 3 weeks to deliver the pictures, and you write that down in your contract, and they see it, and if in a week they call you saying, where are my pictures? See, remember the contract that we spoke about that I told you like in 3 weeks? There it is. You're protected. They're like, oh, I signed that. I didn't know that. Sometimes they don't even read it, but it's good because you're protected. So always make sure that in your delivery times, if you think, and it actually was very helpful for me because I'm a little bit optimistic. So I was like, no, I'm going to do this in 1 week, and, because everything is going to go perfect. Like, it's like I don't have anything to do just to edit this work. It's not like that in my life. So I ended up like taking maybe 14 days. Oh, I got in trouble. Got it? So nowadays I just say, okay, if I think optimistically speaking, it's going to take me 1 week, let me put 3 just to make sure that I have a cushion. Okay? And then the other thing, it's also important to make sure that you understand that you're setting up the stage. They know what to expect. They're not going to be waiting right away, like the product. I mean, there are certain situations when I work in events, especially nowadays because of the whole social media and stuff, that people like to have the pictures right away. So as I'm doing the event, what I tend to do like really quickly is that as I'm photographing, if I see that something came out really cool, I just rate it in my camera. There are some cameras that you can just rate, and then I just rate it in my camera, and then when I upload it to Lightroom, I will just like filter the pictures with the 1-star rating, and then that's what I'm going to give them, just like a sneak peek. Got it? And then they're happy. But make sure that you're clear about your delivery schedule, and don't be optimistic. Be real with you. And you know who's going to give you this answer of how much you take to deliver a picture is that homework that you did before of setting up your timings. Super important, because people get angry when they don't get their pictures on time. They do. Okay? And frustrated. Good? And you might even lose them. So that's in terms of the timings in your contract. The other thing that's very important, guys, is the payment. It's okay to ask for a deposit. Like I require 50% deposit if you're hiring me. It's a non-refundable deposit because, you may be like renting equipment. I rented a lot of equipment because, when I was doing like weddings and stuff, everybody was like, no, you have to get the 2470 and the 70-200. And then, I was happy with my 2470, but I hated the 70-200. So my goal is sometimes you will be renting equipment, right? And if they cancel your session like in the morning because stuff happens, you have to pay that. And if they didn't make a deposit, then you have a bill to pay, and you didn't do anything. So protect yourself like that, like with that deposit. Make clear what happens if something goes wrong. Like if, say, okay, if you're not sure and you think like you can make it to the session, maybe let me know 24 hours in advance. That's good. And then the other thing, it's also important to set up the payment schedule. You know how horrible it is that you finish a job and they're not paying you? And you're like, I don't know when they're going to pay me. If you have a schedule and you actually on your contract, let's say, and this is part of my contract, see, here I have like the credit card authorization. So I have the name on the card, name of, the card number, whatever. So I block, my deposit there. And if I say like after your session, you'll have to, your payment is due, I just have to run the card and that's it. So that's important. So you're not like calling people like, hey, do you remember me? Oh, I got so busy, the holidays. Well, no holidays. Like if you have that on the contract, you're gonna be fine. You're gonna be fine. Got it? No holidays for you. Okay. No, but it is important, guys. I remember this. Look, once I had this client. She was an amazing client, and then suddenly it's me and my assistant, because I work normally with a light, like on flash. And this person is holding the light, and and we go to Central Park, and then the kids were like crying and screaming and ran. The day was windy because it was fall, and then she's like, "Oh, Patricia, I can't do the session. Ciao." And then I have this assistant who I blocked her time. I have to pay her, right? And I'm like, and I never produce anything. So those are the things that happen to me. Then that's when I said, no way, Jose, I'm going to have my contract. I don't want this thing to happen to me, because I can't be paying for my mistakes, Again, that reduces your profit. And then, of course, another thing that's important to do is, what's the cost of overtime? Let's say if someone says you may have an hourly rate, right? Like, for example, the way after I did my homework, I know that when I'm charging this amount per hour, the hour really doesn't represent the actual hour of shooting. It represents the hour of me, shooting, selecting, editing, got it? And sharing, whatever. So that's my hour rate. So it's not really 1 hour if they hired me for an hour. It's a little bit more than that. But if you need to specify, like, this is what I'll charge, if you need me more time, I mean, even though maybe you're not shooting, right, because the baby fell asleep and they still want you to stay there or whatever, but you're not shooting, so you're not producing work that later on is going to give you work, but you are there. You may have another client that's waiting for you elsewhere. So it is important to put your overtime cost. You understand, like, the cost of opportunity? If you're in a place, you're not producing elsewhere, so you have to charge for that cost. Got it? So that's important. And then lastly, guys, just make sure that you write down, like, what is going to happen or what are we going to do when things go wrong. On this one, I would say, I mean, I've seen many people, like, if you cancel your kaput, you lost your deposit. I don't like to work that way. I like to say, okay, if you notify me like 24 hours in advance, it's fine. We can just reschedule because things happen, so that's fine. I've seen other photographers say, if you reschedule, you lost it. I mean, I don't like that. That's me personally. But that's the importance about having a contract. And I know it sounds serious, but it's not so serious. Everybody gets it. And you can just have it, like, make a template. For example, I have my contract for mini sessions, for family sessions, for maternity sessions, for newborn sessions. I just send them, and I send them as a PDF. And then people just, like, sometimes they print it at home. They write their information, they sign whatever, and they just send me like an iPhone shot with the contract. That's the contract. It's there. It's fine. And then you just, hold it, and then you just make sure that, you have all that information, like, well written. Good? So that's the importance of having a contract. Then, guys, the other thing that I've seen that also helped me to reduce my timing so I could make more profit was create templates. Super important. The more you specialize your work in, let's say the more you're into, let's say, family photography, most of the times when people email you, they're going to be asking you about a family session, yeah? Or I don't know, an architectural session, whatever. If you create your templates of, hi, thank you for, thank you so much for your email, I'm super thrilled, whatever, right? If you just create those templates, like I named them, like, this is newborn, this is maternity, and then I just literally do copy paste, and I just send them. And it's always like the same thing, I put XXX in the part of name, date, weeks. Does that make sense? And then I just send those templates, because that took me so much time before. And you spend so much time, like, writing those emails, that's a waste of time, because you're doing the same thing over and over again. So why you're going to write that every single time? So just create your template based on the type of product that you're doing, and then just, use them over and over again. Template for welcome email, template for thank you for having me today, template for here are the pictures of your session, template for your contracts, Got it? Huge time saver. Especially, it's going to be easier for you to do when you specialize your working. And that's why it's so important that you really have to understand at the beginning, you might be doing everything all over the place. It's fine, it's fine. But when you get more specific, you'll see how more efficient you're going to be, and it's going to be more profitable. Got it? And yeah, with this, Ramina, a friend of mine who's also a photographer, she was asking me the other day if I use, what's the name of that? Honey Booking or something like that. It's a website that you pay them monthly, and you know, they have contracts customized, the welcome emails, the thank you, and everything. And this is what I told her. Look, I don't want to spend $30 more in this monthly because I already have this, and it's really like it's my process. Like, you know, it's like a session book. This is what you know, like I have my steps written. And I kind of like, I think that I do that because of my engineering, like industrial engineering background, when I was told that I have to kind of like put all my processes, I think. But that's why I don't use that service. But if you don't know where to start, and maybe that's part of, you know, when you're setting up your costs, if you wish to put that as part of your costs, right, then you could use that site because it's interesting. They have all this stuff, like the contracts pre-made, the welcome emails, the thank you emails, and all of that stuff. So it could be an option also to look at. But remember, you have to pay a month. Like, it's a monthly pay. So, you know, it's a fixed cost in your business model. Okay, so that's the importance of creating templates to save time and increase that profit. Remember? Lastly, I think this is the last one. Point number 13, make sure that once you are producing work and you know, you do have your clients, and again, I would say more or less, guys, being honest, what I've heard from all of my colleagues and people that I have coached is that more or less it takes about 4 years for you to get, you know, like a constant flow of clients. You know, like what I mean by constant is that every month you're doing work, you know? And then about like, and don't get scared, about 10 years to be a little bit more settled. I'm not inventing that, it's what I've seen everywhere, you know, from the people who have studied and all. But once you have this flow that things are constantly happening, I do recommend you to register your company, like, you know, I have an LLC, whatever. Make sure that you have your bank account for your company. This is important because you can't be, you know, paying for your mistakes with your personal account. So it's important to see if your business is profitable, because this is serious. This is not a game. This is not like your hobby anymore. This is your business. So you have to know what are your expenses, what are your big business expenses, and separate those two. This is, you know, two different things. You can't be doing that. This is real. And then always make sure that as you go, you separate money to pay taxes, our dear taxes. And then one thing I've found out is that having an accountant is amazing. I mean, we meet with our accountant, and she basically says what's going wrong, what's going right. And she also shares with me business practices of other people who are doing the same thing as me. And then, you know, these people know a lot, the accountants, because they know business models. So, you know, you end up like, oh, so look at this, I'm having this issue, like, what should I do? And they'll kind of like give you some insights on what other businesses are doing. So this part is important because you need to separate your personal expenses from your business expenses. I mean, I'm being serious, like you're not doing this anymore as a hobby, okay? And finally, yeah, this is point 14. Finally, guys, you know, throughout the years of me being a photographer, me working with the school, I've got to meet other entrepreneurs. I have to be honest, it's always good to listen to stories of other entrepreneurs and meet these people. And this is what my mentor, Francisco, actually gave me. This is the business guy, more or less. Like but he always told me, Patricia, you have to meet other entrepreneurs, other people that are doing like businesses similar than yours. It doesn't need to be a photography school. It can be a guitar school. It can be, you know, a math school, a piano school. But see how they're capturing their clients. This is going to give you immense value. And then when I started to go to these meetings and all of that stuff, then I started to see, you know what, that these guys were super nerds. Like they were reading every month, they were reading, like they had all these lists of books, and I'm like, oh, what is this? So then I started to see that that was a common practice among entrepreneurs. Very, very common. And what I've discovered and what I've read and what I've seen, and I'm practicing this now, and that's my goal this year, guys, it's I want to read 2 books per month. But it's not like a novel. It's not like, oh, Indian Passion or whatever. No. It's cool. It's cool if you like it, but that's more like entertaining reading. It's okay. But if you want to use this information for your entrepreneurial business, my tip is read 2 books, one related to your career, and the one that I'm currently reading, it's this one called The Photographer's Playbook by Aperture. It's super cool, in my opinion. You know it, yeah, Mark? Yep. You like it? Yep. Okay, so he likes The Photographer's Playbook. But what I like about it is that you read the process, the creative process of different photographers, and then you know what? You can put into your own practice because you are a photographer. You want to be creative. You want to know what other people are doing. So that's important. Sometimes I read other books of like how to, educate people in art and stuff like that. But this is the one that I started to kind of like read more seriously. It's cool because it's not, it's not a novel. It's not a continuous. It's like stories per photographers. But it's good to kind of like just read their process and see how it goes. And then maybe you can just practice their own process. And then, guys, the one that I'm reading now, it's this one called Profit First. And look at the title. Transform your business from a cash-eating monster to a monster-making machine. So it's cool because this is the book that basically says that one of the things that you have to do whenever you're creating your cost structure and your profit is that you start to build from bottom up. So this is what you want to make. And then from down there, like what you want to make in terms of the profit, this is how you have to build. And these are the prices that you should be charging. So I know this is not very photo related, but guys, believe me, every single entrepreneur that I have met and that has a business that is successful, okay, they read a lot, okay? So that would be, my last tip. And of course, reading is good. This was kind of like, for me, like a discovery, like they read books. But also the other part of reading, it's also like make sure that you know what's going on outside, that you take courses. Like if you admire a photographer and somehow you find out that they're gonna teach a workshop in New York City, try to make it happen. Try to assist to that workshop. It's gonna be cool. You're gonna be learning from them. You're gonna be learning for other people. Just gonna be seeing what's going on. What are they doing? So this is super important because once you start your own business, it's a never-ending story. It's like it doesn't stop, and you have to be like on it. Okay? But always remember, knowing your numbers and your time is important. If you want to do this seriously, it's important. It's the only way to stay. I don't want to be like, that the story of the photographer that my doctor told me this morning, that in the end she ended up like not doing it anymore, because she wasn't able to work until 2 a.m. every day, and she had 2 kids. But you know what? That was happening to her. It's because in the end she didn't know how long it took her to edit this work, right? And if she knew that, she could just hire someone to do that part for her, instead of like giving up, And remember, this is a lot of being really passionate and a lot of perseverance. This is not gonna be like right away. There's a lot of photographers out there, a lot. But the only ones that I've seen that have succeeded, because I went to school with many people and not all of them are doing photography. I would say, being honest, like Francesca, like maybe like 10%, like from all the people who went to school with us, 10% are really making a living as a photographer. And they had, but that's why you have to know your numbers. I'm super into the numbers because that's the only way to make it, real. So it's not a hobby. Okay? Thank you so much for coming.